Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking the plunge into something I think a lot of us grapple with. It's this puzzle. Why do really smart, decent people, people in our families, our friends, colleagues, end up on completely different sides of issues, especially moral ones? It feels like these gaps are just getting wider.
It's a huge question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's so easy to just assume the other person is maybe, I don't know, badly informed.
Sure.
Or maybe even acting in bad faith.
Exactly, or just being deliberately difficult.
Right. But what if the real root of this division isn't about someone failing to think clearly? What if it's actually built into the way our moral minds work? That's what the research, the source material we're diving into today really points towards.
Okay, so that's our mission for this deep dive then. We want to get a handle on the psychological mechanics behind all this division. We've pulled together some core ideas here, mainly from moral psychology. Jonathan Haidt's work is central.
The foundational stuff.
Yeah, and we're mixing that with some classic social psychology, Festinger on dissonance, Zimbardo on group behavior, and then bringing in relationship science and even some neurophysiology to build, hopefully, a practical path towards connection.
The goal really is to move past that feeling of just frustration, and get towards some genuine understanding. We'll track this from the intuitive roots of our beliefs, see how groups kind of lock those in, and then look at what needs to happen inside us, physically even, to make empathy possible.
Sounds like a plan. So where do we start? This idea that logic isn't king when it comes to moral arguments.
That's the perfect place. It's the big paradigm shift.
Okay, let's dig into this first principle because honestly, it changes everything about how you might approach a disagreement. For ages, the thinking was, we face a moral issue, we reason it through logically, carefully, and then we decide what's right.
Yeah, the philosopher's model. But the psychological research completely flips that around. Gives us principle one, intuitions come first, strategic reasoning second.
Intuitions first.
Right. This is really the engine driving the division.
Ah.
These moral intuitions, they're super fast. They're like a gut feeling, an emotional response. It happens almost instantly, way before our slower, more deliberate reasoning process even gets going.
So it's like a flash of yes or ew, no, before you've even constructed an argument.
Exactly. It's visceral. And here's the kicker. That initial intuition tends to steer the reasoning that follows. Haidt uses this great analogy of the rider and the elephant.
Yes, I remember this. The intuition is the huge elephant lumbering in whatever direction it feels like going. And the conscious reasoning is the tiny rider perched on top, who mostly just figures out how to explain why the elephant is going that way. The rider thinks they're steering, but often they're just the spokesperson.
Precisely. The elephant, the intuition has already leaned or moved. The rider, our reasoning, then scrambles to make sense of it, to justify it.
So the crucial thing for you listening is, if you go into a moral debate expecting the other person's reasoning to be this objective search for truth, you're probably going to get incredibly frustrated.
You really are. You'll think, why are they being so illogical, so inconsistent, so stubborn? But their reasoning might not be for finding universal truth in that moment.
Okay, wait, that's a big statement. If reasoning isn't primarily for finding the truth in these situations, what is it for? That feels wrong somehow.
It feels wrong based on how we think reasoning should work, but evolutionarily, the argument is that moral reasoning developed as a social tool. It's strategic. It mainly does two things.
Okay.
One, justify our own actions and feelings after the fact so we look good to others.
Yeah.
Maintain our reputation.
Makes sense. Impression management.
Yep. And two, defend our team,
Right.
our group, our political party, our family when it comes under attack. So when we argue about morality, we're often less like scientists seeking truth and more like lawyers.
Lawyers.
Yeah, lawyers hired by our gut feelings, our intuitions, to build the best possible case for why those feelings are right, regardless of the objective facts.
Wow. Okay. So the practical advice then is when you see a really heated argument, maybe between family members about politics or even a couple disagreeing, don't get sucked into just batting down their logical points one by one.
Probably not your most effective strategy, no. Because that stated argument, it's often what psychologists call a post hoc construction. It was built after the intuitive judgment was made, specifically to defend that judgment.
So you need to kind of look past the words, the justifications, and try to sense the underlying intuition, the elephant.
That's the idea. What's the core feeling driving this? Is it disgust? Is it a sense of loyalty being violated? Is it fairness? Until you have a sense of that deeper intuition, the writer will just keep generating new arguments. You'll be arguing with the spokesperson, not the boss.
And this whole process, this lawyer-like strategic defense, leads us right into what the sources call the self-righteous trap, doesn't it? If my reasoning's main job is defending me and my side, well, hypocrisy seems almost inevitable.
It becomes incredibly difficult not to be hypocritical, yeah? The golden rule, do unto others, is fundamentally hard work because our default setting is self-justification.
So the sources actually say we are, like, naturally prone to hypocrisy.
In a functional sense, yes. The psychological research really backs up that old wisdom about, seeing the tiny speck in your neighbor's eye while missing the huge log in your own. It's not just a moral failing. It's how our cognitive biases work.
How so? What are the mechanisms?
Well, things like the self-serving bias. When we do something good, it's because we have great character, right? But when we mess up, oh, it was the circumstances. It wasn't really our fault.
Ah, okay. But when someone we disagree with does something good.
Oh, that was just luck, or they had ulterior motives. And when they mess up,
Uh-huh.
hey, that proves their fundamentally flawed character. We systematically apply different standards.
So this distorted lens, this good versus evil filter, it's almost always active. It's the engine of self-righteousness. Why is just knowing this the first step to maybe getting out of the trap?
Because it chips away at your certainty. If you can accept, even intellectually at first, that your own mind is designed to make you feel utterly right and to paint the other side as unreasonable or bad, it can lower your defenses just a bit. You walk into a disagreement remembering that the other person feels just as convinced of their own righteousness as you do, likely due to the very same psychological processes. That fosters a tiny bit of humility, maybe.
And then things get even more complicated when we bring in this idea of the role of the sacred. This isn't just about religion, is it?
Not at all. The sources are clear on this. People find things sacred, meaning inviolable, possessing infinite value, something you don't trade off in all sorts of places. Yes, deities and religious texts, but also...
Like what? Secular things.
Absolutely. Things like the Constitution for some people.
Yeah.
Or national identity. Or core political principles like individual liberty or social justice. Even nature itself can be held as sacred. Or certain group values, like loyalty or purity.
So when an argument touches one of these sacred values,
it's no longer just a practical debate about policy options or who's right about a fact. It becomes existential. It feels like an attack on the moral foundations of the universe, or at least the foundations of the group's identity.
that explains why political arguments get so incredibly vicious and personal sometimes. We're not just disagreeing about a tax rate. You might be perceived as attacking something holy.
Precisely. The stakes are infinitely high when the sacred is involved. And if our intuitions feel sacred and our reasoning is busy defending them, we need to understand how our very perception helps lock all this in place.
Right, which leads to how perception reinforces bias, this idea of cognitive filtering. We think we see the world as it is, but we don't.
Not even close. We live under what some call a decision illusion. Our senses take in a flood of information, but our brain filters it, processes it, and constructs a representation of reality. And we base our decisions on that representation, not on raw reality itself.
And part of that filtering is about efficiency, right? We can't possibly analyze every single detail of every experience. We need shortcuts.
We absolutely do. And that leads to what the sources call rubricized perceiving. It's a bit of jargon, but the idea is simple. Instead of really seeing the unique details of a person or situation,
You slap a label on it.
you
Yeah.
classify it, you ticket it, you fit it into a pre-existing mental box or rubric. It's like using cliches instead of thinking of a fresh way to say something. You grab the ready-made mental shortcut.
Can you give an example of how that reinforces bias?
Sure. Let's say you hold a strong belief that people who support candidate Y are, fundamentally naive. That's your rubric.
Okay.
Then you meet someone new, find out they support candidate Y. Instantly, before they even say much more, your brain pulls up the naive rubric. You start interpreting everything they say through that lens. If they say something thoughtful, maybe you dismiss it as luck. If they say something simplistic, you seize on it as proof.
So the rubric filters perception to confirm itself. It stops you from seeing evidence that might contradict the label.
Exactly. The classifying happens so fast, it short-circuits genuine curiosity or openness to the actual person or data. You become quick to certainty, maybe even aggressive in defending your view, because your perception has already prejudged the input based on the existing bias.
Okay, so we've got these individual minds, driven by intuition, justifying with reason, filtering perception. Now, what happens when we put these minds together in groups? This seems to be where things really amplify, right? And this brings us to Leon Festinger's work on cognitive dissonance.
Absolutely. This is a classic foundational concept. We have this fundamental drive to achieve consonance. Cognitive dissonance is that deeply uncomfortable feeling you get when you hold two conflicting thoughts, beliefs, or values, or, and this is key, when your actions clash with your beliefs.
That clash between what you believe and what you actually do, that seems like a major source of it. The sources mention forced compliance.
Yes, that's one of the most studied triggers. It's when some external pressure, maybe social pressure, maybe a reward, maybe avoiding punishment, pushes you to act in a way that goes against your private convictions.
Can you walk us through that famous experiment, the one with paying people to lie? It really illustrates the mechanism, I think.
It really does. So participants did this incredibly boring, tedious task, just turning pegs on a board over and over.
Sounds
It
awful.
was designed to be. Then they were asked to tell the next participant waiting outside that the task was actually really interesting and fun, essentially to lie.
Okay.
Now here's the twist. Some were paid $20 for telling this lie, which was a decent amount of money back then. Others were paid only $1.
A big difference in justification.
Huge. The people paid $20 had a clear external reason for lying. Yeah, I lied, but hey, 20 bucks. They experienced low dissonance because the behavior, lying, was easily justified by the reward.
But the $1 group, they lied for practically nothing. That must create a massive internal conflict. I believe the task was boring, but I just told someone it was fun for $1.
Exactly. Huge dissonance. Now, how do you resolve that discomfort? You can't easily take back the lie. The behavior is done. So what's easier to change?
Your belief about the task.
Bingo. And that's what happened. When surveyed later, the participants who were paid only $1 rated the boring task as significantly more enjoyable and interesting than those who were paid $20. They reduced the dissonance by changing their private attitude to align with their behavior. They convinced themselves the task wasn't that bad after all.
That is just fascinating. We literally rewrite our own feelings to justify our actions, especially when the external justification is weak. And this dissonance gets stronger depending on a couple of factors.
Yes, the sources highlight two main things that crank up the dissonance. First, the importance of the decision. Choosing between two brands of coffee, probably low dissonance. Choosing between two potential spouses or career paths, much, much higher dissonance.
And the second factor.
The attractiveness of the unchosen alternative. If you choose option A, but option B was also really appealing, that lingering appeal of option B keeps the dissonance alive. Did I make the right choice?
And to get rid of that uncomfortable feeling, we start doing mental gymnastics.
We do. We actively change our cognitions. We start emphasizing all the good things about our choice. My new car gets great mileage. And actively downplaying or finding fault with the rejected option. That other car probably had terrible blind spots.
And we seek out information that confirms we made the right choice.
Zealously. We become confirmation bias machines. We look for articles praising our car model and avoid reviews that might say something negative. We want information that adds constant cognitions and actively avoid anything that increases dissonance.
Which just reinforces what we learned in Section 1. We're not neutral information processors. We're comfort seekers, psychologically speaking.
Very much so. Defensive managers of our own internal state.
Now take this individual mechanism and put it into a social context. That's where we get social support and the echo chamber, right?
Exactly. Groups are incredibly powerful tools for managing dissonance. If I'm feeling shaky about a decision I made or a belief I hold, what's the quickest way to feel better?
Talk to people who agree with you.
Precisely. Seek out like-minded peers. Hearing others validate my choice or belief adds those consonant cognitive elements. See? Everyone thinks I did the right thing. The group becomes a buffer against doubt.
And we see this everywhere now, especially online. People don't just share their views, they curate who they share them with and who they listen to.
Absolutely. High dissonance changes communication patterns. People tend to talk more about the topic, but primarily with those who already share their viewpoint. This creates the echo chamber effect.
Where the same justifications just bounce around and get stronger.
Yeah, it leads to these confirmation cascades. A belief, maybe initially formed through intuition and then justified to reduce dissonance, gets repeated and validated within the group until it feels like undeniable truth. It can also push the group's overall view towards more extreme positions because moderate voices get drowned out or pressured to conform.
But it's not just about seeking comfort within the group, is it? The sources mention a darker side where the group actively tries to change other people's minds.
Yes, the drive isn't purely defensive. It can become offensive in a way. When a group faces a major dissonance challenge, maybe a core belief is powerfully contradicted by events, like a prophecy failing or a policy backfiring spectacularly.
They don't just give up the belief.
Often, the opposite happens. They engage in what's called mass proselyting. They double down and try harder than ever to convert outsiders to their viewpoint.
Why? That seems counterintuitive. If your belief just got proven wrong, why try to sell it harder?
Because if they can convert someone new, that new convert provides powerful social proof. It's like saying, see, our beliefs must be right because this person just joined us. Each conversion helps reduce the collective dissonance of the group without them having to face the uncomfortable possibility that they were wrong all along.
So it's less about genuinely saving the convert's soul, perhaps, and more about soothing the group's own psychological discomfort.
That's a key part of the dynamic, yes.
Yeah.
Saving face, collectively. Now, this intense need for consistency, for belonging, for reducing dissonance, it can twist perfectly normal human needs into something destructive. This is where Philip Zimbardo's work provides a stark warning.
Right, the perversion of core needs. We have a basic need to be consistent, to make sense of the world. How does that get twisted?
Well, that need for consistency is usually helpful. It helps us act reliably. But when we've made a bad decision or committed to something harmful, maybe stayed in a bad relationship, or doubled down on a failing investment, or, in Zimbardo's case, accepted the role of guard, that need for consistency can force us to rationalize the bad decision. We have to make it seem logical, necessary, even good, because admitting we were wrong creates too much dissonance, especially if we're already invested. The guards in the Stanford prison experiment didn't start out brutal, but as they committed small acts of authority or aggression.
They had to justify those acts to maintain a consistent self-image as a guard.
Exactly. I did this, therefore it must have been necessary or justified. They had to honor the commitment to the role, which led them down a path of rationalizing increasingly abusive behavior. The need for consistency trumped their personal morality.
And what about the need to belong? That's fundamental too.
Absolutely essential for survival. We need connection, cooperation, group acceptance. But Zimbardo showed how easily this can be perverted into excessive conformity, blind obedience to group norms, and intense hostility toward anyone outside the group, the classic in-group versus out-group dynamic.
The participants seem to prioritize fitting their role guard or prisoner above all else.
Because the need to belong to that group in that extreme situation became paramount. It overrode individual judgment for many of them.
And for the prisoners, the sources mentioned another need being frustrated, the need to understand, to have a predictable environment.
Yes, the arbitrary, unpredictable cruelty of the guards destroyed their sense of agency and understanding. When reality stops making sense, when you can't predict what will happen next, it's terrifying. It frustrates that basic need to comprehend our world, leading to withdrawal, passivity, depression, a reluctance to even try anymore. The group dynamics, fueled by dissonance and role-playing, trapped everyone. Okay, so we've seen how intuition, reasoning, perception, and group dynamics can create these deep divides and cycles of justification. If that's the problem, the solution has to involve interrupting those cycles, right? We need to shift gears from defense to openness.
And this is where we move more into the practical how-to, drawing from relationship science and even physiology. The first step seems really internal, shifting from blame to understanding.
It really is. The research on relationships, particularly couples in distress versus those who thrive, highlights a key difference in how they explain negative events. It's about explanatory style.
Pessimistic versus optimistic.
Exactly. Distressed couples often fall into a pessimistic view. When their partner does something hurtful or neglectful, they attribute it to stable internal flaws in the partner's character. He's always selfish. She's inherently inconsiderate.
And if you believe the problem is inherent and unchangeable, well, there's not much hope, is there?
None at all. That view basically guarantees continued conflict or eventual separation. You've already decided the person is fundamentally flawed. But the contrasting optimistic view sees negative events differently.
How so?
It attributes the partner's behavior more to temporary situational factors. If a spouse forgets something important, the thought isn't he's an idiot. It's more like, wow, he must be really stressed at work, or maybe she didn't get enough sleep.
It leaves room for grace, for context.
It does. It separates the person from the behavior. If the cause is situational, then it's changeable. It allows you to feel empathy instead of just contempt. You're not writing the person off.
And this ties into how we handle anger, too. There's a difference between anger that destroys and anger that builds.
A huge difference. Destructive anger focuses on attacking the person, their character, their worth, their intentions. You are lazy. You never cared. This just fuels that self-righteous trap and creates an us versus them dynamic. It shuts down compassion.
Okay, so what does constructive anger look like?
Constructive anger, as the sources frame it, focuses on the problem or the wrongdoing, not the person's inherent badness. It highlights the harm being caused and the conditions that allowed it. It's motivated by a desire for change, for justice, for setting things right.
So instead of "you're a slob," it's
It's more like, I feel really frustrated and unseen when the agreed-upon chores aren't done. It creates more work for me, and I need us to stick to our plan or figure out a new one. It's about the impact and the need for a solution, not just a personal attack. It can actually energize problem solving.
that distinction is crucial.
Yeah.
And it leads perfectly into the practical conflict de-escalation toolkit, the specific tactics for handling disagreements better.
Yes. These are drawn from observing thousands of couples. And the number one predictor of whether a conflict conversation goes well or badly is how it begins. It's all about softening the startup.
How you bring up the issue in the first place.
Exactly. Starting a difficult conversation with criticism, sarcasm, or blame, what relationship researchers call a harsh startup, is like setting a match to gasoline. The research shows you can often predict how the whole conversation will end based on the first minute or two.
Give me an example of harsh versus soft.
Okay, harsh startup.
Oh,
You never listen to me. We need to talk about how disconnected we are. It's accusatory, uses never, attacks character.
Okay, defensive walls go straight up.
Instantly. Soften startup. Hey, I've been feeling a bit distant from you lately and I miss our connection. Could we find some time to talk about how we're doing? It expresses a feeling, I feel, states a need, I miss, and invites partnership. Could we?
Much more likely to get a positive response, or at least not an immediate counterattack. Okay, so you start softly. What happens when the conflict is underway? There's this need to take responsibility.
Yes, absolutely critical, especially after things have maybe gotten a little heated and you've both had a chance to cool down. You have to own your role,
Even if you feel like you're mostly in the right.
especially then. Because of that self-righteous trap, remember, our minds naturally make us feel like the innocent victim or the righteous warrior. To break the cycle, you have to consciously look for and acknowledge your part in the dynamic, however small.
Like maybe how I reacted, or my tone of voice, or maybe I let things fester too long.
Exactly. Maybe you were snippy earlier. Maybe you weren't clear in your expectations. Admitting even 10%, I realize I raised my voice earlier and I'm sorry for that, can be incredibly disarming. It signals you're not just there to blame, but to solve. Without that, it just stays a finger-pointing match.
And the language we use matters enormously, getting away from "you always" or "you never."
Absolutely. Replace those globalizing, blaming you statements with specific I statements and clear requests.
Okay, break down the I statement formula.
The classic structure is, I feel emotion when specific behavior situation because impact on you. I need clear, positive requests.
Let's try one instead of "you're always late."
Try. I feel anxious and disrespected when you arrive 20 minutes after we agreed to meet because it makes me feel like my time isn't valued. I need us to agree on realistic times, and if you're running late, I need you to text me as soon as you know.
Much more specific, less attacking, and the request is clear. The sources also mention asking the person to reflect back what they heard.
Yeah, that's crucial for closing the loop. Just so I know we're on the same page, could you tell me what you heard me say I need? It prevents misunderstandings and confirms they've actually processed the request.
Okay, one more tool. When you're trying to actually solve a solvable problem, not a deep values clash, but like how to handle finances or chores, there's this Aikido principle of yielding.
Right. Aikido is a martial art about blending with your opponent's energy, not just blocking it. In conflict, it means prioritizing compromise over winning.
How do you visualize that? The circles.
Yeah. The advice is to draw two imaginary circles. A small inner circle contains your core needs, the absolute non-negotiables on this issue, things you truly cannot yield on without violating a deep value or practical necessity.
Okay, the hill you will die on.
Right. But then draw a much larger outer circle around it. This represents all the things related to the issue that you can be flexible about, things you're willing to compromise on.
So maybe my inner circle is we need a budget we both stick to. But the outer circle includes how we track it, which specific categories get adjusted, who pays which bill, lots of room for flexibility.
Exactly. The key is to make that outer circle as large as possible. The more willing you are to show flexibility and compromise on the less crucial aspects, the more influence you tend to have on getting your core needs met within that inner circle. Yielding on the small stuff builds goodwill and makes persuasion possible.
All these tools, softening the startup, owning your role, I in statements, compromising, they sound great, but they require a certain state of mind, right? You can't really do them effectively if you're feeling attacked or overwhelmed.
You absolutely cannot. And this brings us to, arguably, the deepest layer of the solution, grounded in our own physiology. Self-regulation as a prerequisite for connection.
This is where the nervous system comes in, the polyvagal theory.
Precisely. This theory explains how our ability to socially engage with others, to make warm eye contact, use friendly facial expressions, speak in a calm, inviting tone, isn't just a conscious choice. It's directly linked to the state of our autonomic nervous system, particularly the vagus nerve.
So our inner state dictates our outer ability to connect.
In a huge way. Our nervous system is constantly scanning our environment, including the people in it, for cues of safety or danger. This happens unconsciously, automatically. It's called neuroception.
Neuroception, okay.
It's the nervous system asking, am I safe here? And it's reading subtle cues, someone's tone of voice, their posture, tiny facial muscle movements, even the pace of their breathing.
And what happens depending on the answer?
If the nervous system neurocepts safety, it inhibits our primitive defense responses, fight, flight, or freeze. And it activates what's called the social engagement system, mediated by the myelinated vagus nerve. That's when we feel calm, open, curious, able to connect, empathize, use all those good communication tools.
But if it neurocepts danger, even just a perceived slight or a harsh tone,
Then the defenses come online. The sympathetic nervous system revs up for fight or flight mobilization. Think anxiety, anger, wanting to argue or run away. Or if the threat feels overwhelming, the system might trigger the freeze response immobilization. Think shutting down, feeling numb, dissociating.
and trauma or just chronic high stress can mess this whole system up.
Profoundly. Unresolved trauma, or just living under constant pressure, can make the nervous system hypersensitive to threat cues, or get it stuck in a defensive state. It shrinks our window of tolerance, that optimal zone where we can handle stress and stay engaged.
So people get pushed outside that window easily into either hyperarousal like panic or rage.
Or hyperarousal, that flat, checked out, numb state.
And if you're stuck outside your window of tolerance, connection is basically impossible.
It feels impossible and potentially dangerous. Your whole system is screaming threat. How can you possibly soften your startup or listen with empathy when you're physiologically primed for battle or shutdown? You're trapped in fear and isolation, reluctant to risk vulnerability.
Which means, paradoxically, the path to better connection with others starts with regulating ourselves, with self-care and self-compassion.
It has to. And self-compassion isn't just some fluffy, nice idea. It has direct physiological effects. It involves three things. Treating ourselves with kindness like we would a friend who's struggling.
Instead of harsh self-criticism.
Right. Recognizing our struggles are part of the shared human experience, common humanity, so we don't feel so alone in our pain. And mindfulness, observing our difficult feelings without getting totally swept away by them.
And the research shows this actually changes our physiology.
It does. Practicing self-compassion has been shown to calm the threat defense system. It lowers stress hormones like cortisol. It increases heart rate variability, or HRV, which is a key indicator of nervous system flexibility and resilience. It literally helps the nervous system neurocept safety from the inside out.
It makes us feel safer in our own skin.
Exactly. And when we feel fundamentally safer and more regulated internally, then we have the capacity, the reservoir of compassion, to extend outwards. We can tolerate disagreement without it feeling like an existential threat. We can stay present and use those communication tools effectively because our nervous system isn't hijacking the bus.
So managing our own internal state isn't selfish. It's the foundation for being able to show up for others with empathy.
It's absolutely fundamental. You can't pour from an empty cup, especially not the cup of compassion and connection. #tag outro. So we've covered a lot of ground today. We started with that really striking idea that our moral beliefs often spring from quick intuitions, these gut feelings.
Yeah, and that our sophisticated reasoning often comes later, acting more like a lawyer defending those feelings and our team, rather than a judge seeking truth.
Right. Then we saw how things like cognitive dissonance, the need for internal consistency, push us to justify our actions and beliefs, often leading us into echo chambers where groups reinforce shared viewpoints.
And how basic needs for consistency and belonging can get distorted under pressure, locking us into conflict or conformity.
But then we shifted to the solutions, moving from blame to understanding by changing how we attribute behavior, using practical communication tools like softening startups and I statements.
And crucially, recognizing that none of that works unless we can manage our own internal state, that our ability to connect hinges on our nervous system feeling safe, which is where self-regulation and self-compassion become essential skills.
It brings us back to this deep link between mind, body, and relationship.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you, the listener, to maybe chew on this week. It draws on something hinted at in the sources about the limits of purely intellectual understanding. This deep desire we have to truly know ourselves and to know the person we disagree with. Maybe it can't ever be fully satisfied just by thinking, by reasoning alone.
Hmm. The idea that maybe the fullest way of knowing, the path that truly bridges the deepest divides, involves something more like this, an act of love or profound empathy that goes beyond just strategic arguments.
So, keeping that in mind, and remembering that the person you find difficult is likely operating from their own intuitive sense of what's right, maybe even what feels sacred to them, what's one small thing you could do this week? Not to win the argument, but maybe just to lower the emotional temperature. One small action rooted in trying to understand their elephant rather than just arguing with their writer.
That's the challenge and the opportunity.
That's our deep dive for today. We hope this exploration gives you some valuable tools and perspectives for navigating the divisions in your own world. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.